With the alpha hitting test realms of MMO Champion doing their data mining, I want to go through the discovered Destruction Warlock spells, artifact tree, and talents thus far, as well as some predictions with their future direction. This is the first iteration of alpha we've encountered, and so they are by no means set in stone, and are almost guaranteed, and in fact some already have been, changed before next summer with Legion's launch. Some quite substantially. The glyphs were not announced yet, but the PvP talents were released. I will be covering the PvP talents for all 3 specs in a later video, as well as the glyphs once they are announced, which will probably be after Demo gets fleshed out. Before we begin, some of the baseline spell changes to Destruction. First, Chaotic Energy is gone. It's no longer a thing. This was the 625% mana regen passive that Destro had, which replaced Life Tap for mana. And with the removal of Chaotic Energy, Life Tap is being reintroduced for Destruction again. So you'll now have to sacrifice 10% of your life to regain 30% mana. Next up, the Burning Embers are gone as Destro's primary resource. Soul Shards have returned to the Destro lock to fulfill a similar role. You will cast spells to generate shards and spend them with Chaos Bolt, which consumes 2 shards per cast at present. Conflagrate generates a Soul Shard, but it does not proc Backdraft anymore, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Backdraft is no longer a baseline ability, it's now a tier 1 talent. Immolate crits have a 30% chance to generate a Soul Shard. Incinerate doesn't generate any Soul Shards, it is literally just a filler spell. Dark Soul is gone as our main DPS cooldown. It will be replaced with a more frequent Doomguard or Infernal that lasts 20 seconds, but it has a 3-minute cooldown and it costs a Soul Shard to cast. Shadowburn, our 20% execute, is now a tier 1 talent. Fire and Brimstone, our AoE buff, is now a tier 1 talent. Havoc, our 2-target cleave debuff, is no longer a charged base system. It allows duplication of your spells for 8 seconds instead of just 3 charges. The 3 charges would get consumed by a single Chaos Bolt or by a Conflagrate, Immolate, or Incinerate. And now it's any spells for 8 seconds. And hot off the presses as of yesterday, and this is what I mean by stuff is in flux, Backdraft is no longer a baseline ability granting haste for Incinerate and Chaos Bolt after you Conflagrate. It is a tier 1 talent, and this change actually conflicts with what they currently have on the artifact weapon, but I'll address that when we get to there. So let's start with the artifact weapon. Destruction's artifact weapon is the Scepter of Sargerasester. The first talent of the tree starts with the Golden Border talent, which is Tearing Time and Space, also called Stuff of the Universe. Kind of bland second name, but they actually have this talent in 2 places with 2 different names, but they're the same ability. Your spells can punch holes in the walls of space and time, opening beneficial portals. I envision this tearing looking like the demon portals from Jiraxxus in Trial of the Grand Crusader and Wrath. This talent being in 2 places tells me they don't know if they want to have this as Destruction's baseline artifact ability, the Golden Portrait, or as one of the Gold Dragon Border talents with something else as Destruction's thematic baseline. Like Affliction is now Reap Soul as a baseline. They're looking for the best fit to get a good Destruction baseline. Personally, I prefer this as the baseline based on its description. We don't know what beneficial portals means, but the idea of tearing through space and time, destroying the very fabric of the universe, matches Destruction's theme. Are these portals going to summon some sort of fell imp from the nether? Are they going to do damage to enemy targets and power us with chaotic energy? What are they going to do that's beneficial? How often do they appear? How long do they last? Many questions surrounding this talent. Like Affliction, I'm going to cover the Golden Dragon Border talents first because they are the end goal of each of the lines and will largely dictate your choice of talents to reach them. The first potential one is the baseline talent we just covered. Whatever that may be, we don't know yet. The second is Conflagration of Chaos. Your Conflagrate always crits, and critical strike chance increases its crit damage, imitating the mechanic from Chaos Bolt. This puts more emphasis on crit for gearing, obviously. The next one is Regard of the Sargerai. Your spells have a 20% chance to trigger Doomfire. Cool! What's Doomfire? So, 1 of 5 spells summons this magic fire of doom. Chaotic Instability increases the critical strike chance of Chaos Bolt by 10, 15, and 20%. And, hey look! It's floating in the middle of nowhere! The talent itself is straightforward, more damage to Chaos Bolt. This will not be one of the Golden Border talents, as all of the Golden Border talents are single point abilities. It'll probably move somewhere in the tree if they do end up keeping it. Alright, moving through the tree now, starting with the baseline talent. Soul Snatcher. Your Chaos Bolt has a 10, 15, 20% chance to refund 2 Soul Shards. They currently cost 2 soul shards to cast, so it has a 10 to 20% chance to refund its cost to cast another one. Eternal Struggle. After casting Life Tap, you take some percent reduced damage for 6 seconds. As mentioned, Destro is going back to life tapping for mana. This talent itself helps offset Destro's lack of regeneration talents like Affliction has. Life Tap for mana could be a bad idea if not handled properly, and here's why. Destro only has 1 dot. Destro has had only 1 dot since Mists of Pandaria when they were dehomogenizing the specs. Destro also only has 1 pet. Less dots and less pets means more of Destro's damage comes from the direct damage of your nukes. If you're not casting a direct damage nuke, your damage during that period is whatever Immolate and your pet does. When you have to cast Life Tap, you're not casting a nuke, therefore not doing much damage. They added Chaotic Energy to allow Destro to ignore mana costs, so you didn't have to waste your globals to Life Tap. Blizzard can compensate for this hindrance by buffing the rest of Destro's abilities to do slightly more damage so that throughout the entire fight, Destro is on par with the other specs, even though it has less passive damage from dots and pets like Affliction and Demo have. And so far it appears Blizzard is keeping this in mind. Price of Power. Your Chaotic Energize... Oh my. I was combining energies and randomize there. Your Chaotic Energies randomize 3 times and select the highest value. Chaotic Energies is the new mastery bonus. It reads your destruction spells deal up to some percent additional damage randomly. So whatever dice rolling they have going on in the background will be done 3 times, and then the highest one is chosen. Alright then. Master of Disaster. Increases the damage dealt by Incinerate by 10, 15, or 20%. Pretty straightforward. Burning Hunger. Increases the chance for Immolate to generate a soul shard by 6, 10, or 13%. Immolate itself starts with a 30% chance to refund when it crits, so this will bring it up to 40% to generate a shard on an Immolate tick crit. Residual Flames increases the periodic damage of Immolate by 20, 30, or 40%. And this is exactly what I was talking about before. Blizzard is trying to help offset Destro needing to life tap for mana instead of casting nukes. This also helps offset Destro's historically terrible time dealing with movement during fights. Devourer of Life increases the damage and healing of Drain Life by... Why is Destruction using Drain Life? There are so many things wrong with this. It's a channeled drain, does shadow damage, heals life, or rather sucks life. No, that is not Destruction. Destruction's version of this would be like a shield, one that absorbs chaotic energies, like Netherward. Remember that old overpowered shield for Destro? Blizzard, you don't need to bring back an absorb that also reduces damage from the School of Magic like it used to. It could just be an absorb. This is definitely more in line with Destro's theme. Probably have it on a 2-minute cooldown, as this should be used sparingly. Like the idea of draining life as Destro, because reasons. To get health back, because it's an emergency. Netherward would be the emergency shield to make sure you don't die until the healers get you topped again. Not to mention, Destro doesn't have flat-out damage reduction like Affliction is getting through mere flesh. Destro is kind of squishy at the moment, comparatively, and reintroducing Netherward would do wonders for Destro's survivability. Planeswalker. Using your Demonic Gateway fully heals you. This is Destruction's version of the 100% heal like Affliction. Usable once every 90 seconds with a debuff preventing you from using the gateway over and over again. For fights with minimal raid movement, meaning the gateways would normally not be used at all, you'll probably put your gateways near the raid stack as close together as possible, which is the 10-yard minimum distance. And so when you use it, you can stay within the AoE heals or the stack of the raid. At first, I discounted this as a very situational heal that was practically unusable because Destruction is so punished by movement. But let's do a quick comparison to Affliction's 100% Healthstone talent and see what you think. So Healthstones, in their current form, can only be used 1 per fight. Whereas you can use this gateway multiple times during a raid encounter, every 90 seconds essentially. Plus, you still have your own, though not as powerful, Healthstone. The other part of Affliction's talent is getting some inconsistent heals whenever your raid members use a Healthstone, but you have no control over that. You can use this Planeswalker talent periodically when you decide. Because of that element of control, I actually think this is a superior talent to Affliction's Healthstone. Fire and the Flames. Through the fire and the flames we carry on. Okay, I'm done singing. Increases the haste effect of Backdraft by some percent. This talent is exactly what we mean when we say things are subject to change. Backdraft is no longer a baseline ability. It is now a tier 1 talent. This artifact is going to have to be changed to something else that affects Destro's baseline abilities. Throughout the rest of the artifact weapons, none of them address talents specifically, with the exception of like Affliction's Drain Soul, and they just say drains because they mean drain life or drain soul, but it's essentially the same ability, whereas with this ability you could not have a backdraft, and now you have a talent in your weapon. So they're avoiding talent abilities or anything that addresses or modifies the talent abilities. So this is going to be changed to something else. I mean, you could even stick that floating chaotic instability talent there in its place. Fire from the Sky. Rain of Fire deals an additional 10, 15, or 20% damage. Straightforward, buff Destro's AoE. Lord of the Flames. Your Rain of Fire also rains infernals. That's pretty sweet. I think this will be moved to the Golden Dragon portrait to replace that duplicate beneficial portal ability, whatever they decide to call it. This is also helping to fill the hole in Destro's AoE repertoire with Fire and Brimstone's removal as a baseline ability. And we'll get into more of the specifics of that coming up in the talents. The Infernals will probably be just like the large pet Infernal, good for AoE situations, but not great for single target. You probably won't want to cast Rain of Fire for single target fights. As an aside, I'm wondering how many Infernals spawn. Do the amount of Infernals that spawn depend on how many targets are hit? Maybe 1 per target in the AoE circle? Or if it will be, say, 3 Infernals per duration that lasts for, again, say, 10 seconds and then collapse? Either way, sounds like a lot of fun and matches the theme of Destro very well. Talents! Starting with a level 15 talents on tier 1. Backdraft. Your Conflagrate reduces cast times of Incinerate and Chaos Bolt by 30% for 5 seconds. So, baseline ability turning talent again, as we've been mentioning throughout. This ability is actually changed from what we know it as now, because right now there's a charge system where 3 charges of the Backdraft are consumed by a single Chaos Bolt, and then Incinerate uses up the rest of the charges. This is a flat 30% buff for 5 seconds, so you can cast 2 Chaos Bolts with this. If you got enough haste, maybe you can cast 3 if you're lucky. Anyways, moving on to Fire and Brimstone. Incinerate hits all enemies near your target. With this talent only including Incinerate, it makes sense that they had to buff Rain of Fire a bit to compensate for Destro's burst AoE. Currently, you can use Immolate to spread Immolate, you can use Conflagrate, and it'll hit the whole raid. And with the level 100 talent, you can even do Chaos Bolt as well. Another important thing to note about this Fire and Brimstone is that it's not a 30% reduced damage Incinerate like it is in its current form. This is the full value Incinerate damage applied to all of the targets. Shadow Burn. Once again, an ability turn talent. Instead of costing Embers, these cost Soul Shards. Instantly blast the targets for some shadow damage. If the target dies within 5 seconds, it generates 2 Soul Shards. Also notice that it does not have the less than 20% health requirement, because executes across the whole board of classes, not just Warlocks, are removed. Even though, by the description, it encourages you to do it to targets that are about to die, so that you generate an extra Soul Shard. The damage Shadowburn deals will have to be significantly less than Chaos Bolt, otherwise we will choose to spend our shards on it instead of Chaos Bolt, especially without any sort of extra haste buff to help with the 3-second long Chaos Bolt cast. Because remember, you're taking Shadowburn here, you no longer have the 30% haste from Backdraft. So for this tier, Blizzard is trying to get you to use Backdraft for single target fights, for AoE fights, Fire and Brimstone, and for more frequent adds appearing but not enough to really warrant the AoE talent, then choose Shadowburn to generate extra shards and Shadow Cleave with Havoc. Tier 2, the level 30 talents. Reverse Entropy. Chaos Bolt restores 25% mana. Remember, it costs 2 Soul Shards to use, and now it will also give you 25% mana. I think this could possibly offset you having to life tap, and this might be the choice for simplicity's sake, and it'll save those globals as well. Roaring Blaze. When you conflagrate an immolated target, the remaining damage of Immolate is increased by 50%. Refreshing Immolate will reset its damage. This means you cast Immolate and then immediately conflagrate. Every time. I wonder if this stacks. Cast both conflagrate charges at once and that Immolate's damage is doubled, not just increased by 50%. Mana Tap. Consumes 40% current mana to grant 15% increased damage for 20 seconds. Destro has enough mana problems already. Same thing I said about Affliction. This encourages you to bottom feed your mana pool potentially to the point where you have to life tap immediately after. I do not foresee this being used in Destruction. Tier 3, the level 45 talents. Soul Leech hasn't really changed. Incinerate grants you and your pet shadowy shields that absorb 15% of the damage dealt for 15 seconds. Mortal Coil also hasn't changed. It's a short field that restores some life. Shadow Fury is an AoE stun. Hasn't changed. Like Howl of Terror returning to Affliction only, Shadow Fury is returning to Destro only. Tier 4, the level 60 talents. Eradication. Chaos Bolt also increases the damage you deal to the target by 20% for 6 seconds. This will be good for chaining Chaos Bolts and really taking advantage of your damage procs. I think this will be the talent choice for this tier. Cataclysm. Same as it is now, except it's moved down from the level 100 talents. It's a huge AoE burst that applies Immolate to all targets hit, so it will be the choice for any heavy AoE fights. Soul Harvest refills 5 soul shards. Destro does not have enough passive damage to be able to spend this long, slowly regenerating shards. I don't think this has a place in Destro, especially when 5 shards is only 2.5 Chaos Bolts. Now, in Affliction, this talent is worth 5 unstable Afflictions at 8 seconds apiece, 40 seconds of extra dot damage, plus 25% chance of each of those to reapply itself. And while Affliction is channeling this to regenerate the shards, the other 3 or 4 dots are still ticking. Now again, with Affliction, the dots are supposed to be the main damage, so you're not losing a whole lot of damage when you're channeling this. Now for Destro, the hard cast spells are like 70 to 80% of its damage historically. So if you're not casting damaging spells, you're basically doing no damage. I don't foresee this being used a whole lot. I hope they replace it with something else. I don't know what. Demonic Circle. I'm still salty about this one. As I mentioned in Affliction, it was a previously baseline ability, now turned into a talent. It remains unchanged. It's a placeable portal that you can teleport to. Burning Rush and Dark Pact are also the same as they are now. Burning Rush is just a speed boost for health costs, and Dark Pact is a shield after sacrificing some health. Tier 6, level 90 talents. The Grimoires are also basically the same, with a few minor changes. Supremacy no longer gives new demons, it just empowers the original ones. Service is the exact same. Sacrifice is a bit different. Instead of empowering some of your abilities, it instead deals extra shadow damage to the target, and all within 8 yards of the target. I don't know why they're mixing shadow with fire again, but yeah, it's not Shadow Flame, it's just shadow. In my opinion, Destro should just have its own fire-based version. Again, Blizzard, keep the theme straight for the specs. None of this intermixing stuff. The Grimoire Sacrifice will be the talent to choose for AoE fights because of that AoE nature of the shadow damage. The level 100 talents, Tier 7, Wreak Havoc or Wreck Havoc. Havoc now lasts 20 seconds, up from its standard 8 seconds, and has no cooldown. This means Destro might have some potential to compete with Affliction on multi-target fights, especially if Havoc remains as its half-global spell. This will be the talent for 2-target fights. Channeled Demon Fire launches 15 bolts of fell fire at immolated enemies within 40 yards over 30 seconds. Each bolt deals some fire damage with a 12-second cooldown. So you can cast this for 3 seconds, wait 9 seconds, cast it again. I wonder if this will channel like a mage's arcane missiles, where it just does one after another, or if it will be 3 bursts of 5 fell bolts, or something like that. So for AoE situations, it's looking like we cast Rain of Fire preemptively before the ad spawn, raining down some Infernals to boot. Precast Cataclysm to hit the targets as soon as they spawn and or group up. This also will apply Immolate to all of them. Then cast this Doomfire on cooldown and recast Rain of Fire as needed. And in between, cast Fire and Brimstone's Incinerate. I don't think with the amount of AoE that Destro has, that Fire and Brimstone Incinerate will be required at all. The ads will probably be dead by the time you get to Incinerate due to Cataclysm's massive damage, spreading Immolate and Demon Fire. I'm curious to see if this is going to be better than casting Incinerate as a filler for single target fights too. Demonic Servitude. This is unchanged. The permanent Infernal and Doomguard. I'm still schoolgirl squealing about this from Warlords of Draenor, by the way. If Channeled Doomfire does not significantly outperform Incinerate as the main filler, then this will be the talent for single target fights, hands down. For the talent tree as a whole, Destro is severely lacking in defensive abilities compared to Affliction. Affliction has a flat-out 20% damage reduction talent, Mere Flesh, increased Drain Life healing, requiring 2 talents, 1 for damage, 1 for health, and Drain Life is its main filler. Plus the raid-wide use of the health thrones, throwing health your way. Destro has a strong Drain Life, and it's done so in a single talent, which I think is silly on its own, and the 100% life every time you use a portal. Destro has no damage reduction except when you life tap for 10% of your life for the 10% damage reduction, which means that Affliction is much more resilient than Destruction. Now, Destruction, except when Demo had the tank spec, was the most survivable spec to play. The Green Fire quest was almost exclusively done by a Destro Warlock because of its defensive abilities. Another ward absorbed all types of magic energy, plus a magic damage reduction in the school of the spell that hit you. It actually had a decent Ember tap, not the worthless one we have now. Health stones, and probably most importantly, it did not have to life tap for mana, taking that health hit, which thankfully provides damage reduction for 6 seconds now. I was also hoping that with the Fell Hunters re-synergizing with Affliction's dots, where it now deals 50% more damage for each of your dots on the target, that the Imp would also get some sort of synergies with Destro. That does not appear to be the case as of yet, but it's still early in the alpha development. They might surprise us. Another thing I wanted to mention is all of this emphasis on crit. Is crit going to surpass mastery without contention? Like right now, mastery and crit are about the same. And actually, I think mastery is slightly ahead. It really depends if it's a multi-target fight or single-target fight. That kind of emphasizes a problem with Warlocks right now. Affliction wants haste, Demo wants mastery, and Destro wants crit. You can see this in the talents, with the exception of Demo, but I'm just assuming that it's going to be mastery again. And with the changes so far, this trend is going to continue, despite them also expressing the desire for players to not care so much about their gear as we do. They want all the stats to be weighted relatively equally, so that when you see a higher eye level piece of gear, you'll think, great, upgrade, instead of, well, that has versatility on it, and even though it's a higher eye level with more stat points overall, it's actually a downgrade, so I'm just going to pass or disenchant it. Blizzard expressed they don't like this attitude, but yet they're continuing to reinforce it. For gearing up as a lock now, you need to pick 2 secondary stats, depending on which spec is simulated highest DPS at the time, and focus on them for gear. But that means both specs are kind of half-assed, and not the best they can be. Like, crit isn't good for Affliction, and haste isn't as good for Destro, but if Affliction and Destro are the top 2 specs, like this tier, short of having 2 entire sets of gear, most people choose to strike a balance between them by ensuring that the second best stat for them both, mastery in this case, is on every piece of loot. Something for Blizzard to consider is spec-specific stats. Similar to the new style of agility intellect gear for druids, with kitty and bear form versus the boomkin and healing, and the gear changes depending what spec they are. So my idea for Warlocks is that when you are, say, Destro, one of the secondary stats that's guaranteed to be on your gear is crit. I mean, they want us to have crit. It's obvious, just looking at all the talents. Crit is going to be the best stat for Destro. And then have the other secondary stat randomized. It could be haste, mastery, versatility. If you switch over to Affliction, then the guaranteed one will be haste with a random other stat. And for Demo, it'd be mastery. Given there will be some tooltip management that would need to be done, but I think this could be a workable solution. So that is about it for the changes to Destruction discovered thus far. I do plan to do one for Demo whenever that gets fleshed out. If you'd like to check out the one I did on Affliction, it's on screen right now. It went up a couple days ago. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like it. If you're new around here, subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or feedback, please leave them below. Thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.